Good evening, and welcome to tonight's Yukon City Council, Yukon Municipal Authority work session. It's July 18th, 2023 at 6:30 p.m. We are here in the council chambers, the Centennial Building, 12 South 5th Street in the great city of Yukon, Oklahoma. Tonight, we're going to be discussing upcoming projects with Team Design with Joe Davis. You're up.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, Vice Mayor, council members. My name is Joe Davis with Team Design. We have a few projects we want to go over. You're going to see some contracts, I believe, later on in the council, and we wanted to give you an update where we are on these specific projects. So with that,
Is it
it's on, I believe.
modern technology?
There we go. Thank you. Maybe I'll just kind of, if you guys can help me out, if it's not working, that'd be great. So the projects we're going to talk more specifically about will be the wastewater treatment plant, the history of the wastewater treatment plant, the reasons why we're moving forward with some changes to the wastewater treatment plant, the Kings Ridge Addition hydraulic study. There's some localized drainage in the area that's creating some problems for some of the property owners. And the very first step is to go ahead and look how we can solve those. So we're talking about a drainage study first. Frisco Road sanitary sewer line. It's as the city continues to grow out that direction with the improvements at the new interchange there. How do we go ahead and continue that momentum and keep the growth going? So the sanitary sewer is the big issue out there. Health Center Parkway, again, we have some localized flooding there. With all the additions that have gone on to the hospital out there and some of the other development that's gone out there on the commercial area, we're starting to see some localized flooding in that roundabout area. So how do we take care of that? Additionally, downstream, we've had some additions added to the spillway that's in Oklahoma City that's created some of our problems also. So again, that's the drainage report. We'll go into some detail on that. Then Wagner Road, it'll go ahead and be that next mile extension as we go further to the east on Wagner Road. We'll talk a little bit about that. And then the last project that's been about 30 or 40 years now for the city of Yukon is the State Highway 4. So the project was let. We'll go ahead and kind of talk where we are status-wise on that project. So small print because there's an awful lot that's been happening at the wastewater treatment plant. Wastewater treatment plant, there's been studies done trying to say what do we need to do for improvements to the wastewater treatment plant. Some of the maintenance issues are needing to be repaired. So while we be looking at repair of some of the existing maintenance items and the bigger issue we have is the plant's rated at 3 MGD. And currently we're flowing at about 3 MGD. So to go ahead and look at expansion, I think you guys may have seen some of these studies we've done before in the presentations we've done. We're projecting we need to have the plant to be able to have a capacity of 5 MGD. So there was a contract with Team Design back in December 9th of 2020. And once when we started meeting with ODEQ, they requested some additional testing that was not anticipated. And that testing was to go ahead and look at wet flows and dry flows in Canadian River and what type of impact we would have on the river when we'd go ahead and increase that additional flow that we're going to be having to the Canadian River. A little bit after that, ARPA funds came out, and ARPA funds were really kind of a neat deal. So a lot of the cities were able to figure out how they could utilize those funds. The thing that was really unique about it, which was kind of different from other grants they've had in the past, that the design fees can be included in the ARPA funds. So that basically you're getting a 100% project at the end of the day. So the design would be paid for, construction would be paid for it also. City staff went ahead and called us and talked about what can we do to try to utilize the ARPA funds to the fullest extent that you could and have the least amount of impact to your city coffers. And that was for us to go ahead and terminate our contract. So we terminated our contract. The city of Yukon then went out for a solicitation for qualifications on the wastewater treatment plant. The city went ahead and interviewed a few companies and we are happy that we were selected to go ahead and move forward with the new phase. With that, we went ahead and met all the federal requirements for a selection process, so we would go ahead and be able to be qualified for ARPA funding for the design fees. So it's pretty much similar to what we were talking about capacity-wise in 2020. There's been a couple of differences, though, to it. We went ahead and had more meetings with staff and the operator to really identify key things that they needed to have at the plant. So when we originally looked at it in 2020, the budget was $4.92 million. And again, from meeting to staff and seeing what's happened to the cost of materials, the cost is closer to $8.07 million. Along with that, we went ahead and included the additional testing that was going to be required for the river that wasn't in the original design fee. And it's a very specialized testing that has to be done. So there's only one company that we could find in the greater region that would come in and do the testing for us. So it's extremely specialized on that testing. The document that we had in 2020 was virtually identical to the contract that we're proposing tonight. So you're going to see that many of the line items are the same. The line items that are different are the ones that were for the additional testing on the river itself. That's different from the initial. And then the changes from the preliminary plans and the final plans. The construction administration and the construction inspection all stayed the same. So that's kind of giving everybody an idea what the differences were in the original contract and this project. The other thing that we did different on this project was we recognize that it's a very substantial cost to the city, and we recognize that the city is going to be looking for as many opportunities as they can to fund the project, recognizing also that the ARPA funds would not cover the entire improvements for the wastewater treatment plant. So we went ahead and again worked with staff and identified the number of phases that we could build this in over a number of years. So we identified 10 different phases that we can go ahead and have standalone projects to go ahead and bid, to go ahead and meet the budget constraints that the city may have in the future. So again, that was a little bit something different we added to the project this time. And again, if anybody has any questions, please ask us. It may be easier when we go to project specific that instead of going back at the end of the presentation. So if there's no questions on that, we'll go ahead and go to the next project. And it's the King Ridge drainage. And the issue that's happened here is there's been some improvements to the east of the original Kings Ridge addition. So we're having some localized flooding in the areas. So the question is, how do we go ahead and take care of these additional issues we have further downstream? We already have a sump and a Gary grate in the sump at Kings Ridge, but we're still experiencing some flooding. So we've looked at a couple different options. Right now, when we're looking at the options, we have to run the hydraulics to see if it's actually viable or not. So before we start running with construction plans, we need to go ahead and see hydraulically if it's going to work. So what you're going to be seeing tonight is just for the hydraulic study on that. And if I go to the next slide, you're going to go ahead and see two different options we're looking at. The blue line is an area that's a more direct route. The issue is we do not have an easement between the two houses. If we go further south where the yellow line is, there's a 20-foot drainage easement there. So again, we're looking at both routes hydraulically to see which works the best and which is the most cost effective, and also trying to utilize an existing easement. The cost for that is about $125,000 to $150,000 that's anticipated if these options will work hydraulically. Next project up is the Frisco Road Sanitary Sewer, Health Center Parkway. So the Health Center Parkway, this is an area that's been flooding for a while. There's a couple things that's contributed to it. Before we put the roundabout in, it had kind of that big arched curve going through there. A lot of the drainage was going through there. And as it goes ahead and goes to the west and to the south, there's just a bar ditch out there that carries the water. So when we look downstream, you can kind of see the pond that's there. They've raised the spillway a couple times, which is not letting the water drain off as fast as it had in the past. Additionally, we've had some additional construction that's gone on out there. The hospital's had a few additions out there, and then we've seen quite a bit of expansion with the office park area that's out there and also the commercial area that's out there. And it's just compounding the drainage areas we have. Eventually the water goes down, but when we have heavy rains, it really floods that roundabout area. So how do we go ahead and solve that? We start looking at how we can put some Gary grates in, similar to what we were talking about in Kings Ridge, to try to pick up the water in the street. And then we start looking at areas we can start putting that water. So you can see as we look to the south side of Health Center Parkway, there's that large green belt area. We can do a combination area there of trying to excavate some of that soil to try to put some of that water in there for storage as it goes further to the west and south. So again, that's the study that we're looking at. In some cities, you see them do that quite a bit where they're utilizing existing right-of-way to go ahead and put some storage in to take care of some of those high peaks and trying to do those improvements. The big issue that we have here, though, is once we get to the existing channel, and as that channel goes to the west and to the south, to see how it's going to be impacted by what they've done in Oklahoma City with that spillway change. Also, we have a couple businesses that back up to that ditch, and the last thing we want to do is do anything that's going to flood those people. So while we think we can get the water there quicker, we need to make sure we're not flooding those businesses that have located right behind that bar ditch. So again, what we're talking about first is looking at the hydraulics, hydrology, and then the improvements from there. Does anybody have any questions? Now we'll go to Frisco Road, I think. Back on track now. So on Frisco Road sanitary sewer, I-40 was constructed, in the late 50s and early 60s, and when they came through, they bisected some section line roads. We recognized that at that time it was going to be a big footprint. So the city had enough foresight back in the early 60s to go ahead and request a large pipe, a 12-inch pipe, be placed underneath I-40. And with that, they had an 8-inch sanitary sewer line that was placed in that pipe. We went ahead and added the interchange, and when we added the interchange, as you can see in the northern portion of the interchange on the folded diamond, we had to go ahead and extend that casing and the sanitary sewer line to get outside of where the new right-of-way is. So as we've gone ahead and done the improvements to the interchange, getting it prepared for future development, the last piece that we don't have right now is the sanitary sewer. And again, this is one of the last pieces that will go ahead and connect the sanitary sewer that's underneath the interstate to the 12-inch. That's an existing sanitary sewer that was upsized to 12-inch to go ahead and take care of what's proposed. And again, the yellow is the portion that we're talking about to be constructed in this picture. And again, the cost opinion for it's a very deep sanitary sewer is $365,000 for the construction of that sanitary sewer. The last project that the city is looking at expending dollars for construction is a Wagner Road rehabilitation project. And again, this picks up for Yukon Parkway. Yukon Parkway, I think, turned out very nicely. Instead of having to dodge all the potholes, it's a very nice street now. It's basically 12-foot lanes with 2-foot shoulders. So it has plenty of width, so if anybody's pulling any trailers, they don't feel like they're going to drive off into the bar ditch. So the section we have proposed as we continue this section moving to the east is the same section. It's 12-foot lanes with 2-foot shoulders. The section here is a little bit unique because once we get to the quarter section point, the asphalt turns into an existing concrete section. And similar to what we saw in the first project, when we had that transition, when the city made the requirements for widening, when additions were coming in, they would widen from the section line road to the south into that development. Same things happened here where the asphalt road is on the center line of the section. And when we get to the concrete section, it now jogs to the south where the far north edge of that concrete section is now on the section line. So we basically are jogging to the south as we're going east one lane. And that transition happens where that tank battery is on the south side and where we have a lift station out there. So if you recall what we did on the first section of Wagner Road when we had that transition, we worked a few hundred feet making a more smooth transition instead of that real sharp bend that had been there in the past next to a mailbox. And we're proposing to do the same thing here where we have a smoother transition so we can make that an easier transition instead of just a quick jog over. What they've done now, they've added a little bit of asphalt to the outside of the concrete to the north side to make that an easier transition. So we're looking at removing a couple of those pavement sections of PC concrete and making it all with concrete, so we won't have any asphalt in that transition period. Similar to what we did on the previous job, we're looking at replacing about 10% of the concrete panels. The concrete panels are actually pretty good as we get to the far east end of the project, but about the middle of the project, we have a horizontal line crack going through it on the north section of the pavement. So we'll be evaluating those cracks to see which panels we really do need to replace. The good thing is it's not in the wheel path, but some of them are pretty bad. We'll probably be looking at replacing. The construction opinion on that was about $1.2 million for the half mile of PC pavement, and then about $200,000 for the 10% panel repair. So it makes the total cost about $1.4 million for that project. Then the last project is State Highway 4. State Highway 4, again, that's been our long project that's been around Yukon for a long time through all the different phases. First phase, I think, is a really nice project. The bridge is a great bridge. The road's a great surface too. So the next phase is coming up, and I believe everybody understands what that first phase is. As we get closer to Main Street, the first few blocks are going to be PC concrete. And then as we go ahead and move further to the north, it'll go ahead and be an asphalt section very similar to what's out there right now. The project was let back in 1/12/23 and was then awarded to 16/23. Swartz Paving is the contractor it's been awarded to. We've been having some issues with utilities on the relocations. OG&E is really the last one that we have. OG&E has gone ahead and replaced all their facilities. The problem is you're probably seeing the old poles are still there. With all the storm damage that's happened around this region though, they just haven't had the personnel to go ahead and remove it. So they're anticipating that those are going to be removed in the next couple of weeks. Once when those are removed, then the contractor is anticipated to be mobilizing. So again, we think that the contractor should be on the site within the next few weeks. So with that, if anybody has any questions.
Anybody have any questions? All right, thank you so much. That was very informative. Thank you for coming. All right, if no one has any questions, then this meeting is adjourned and we will take a 10-minute recess and start our next meeting.